Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is the progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. Remember, you can also send me a tweet to EGBERTOWILLIES. That is, at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is politics done right.
1, 2, 3.
Well, folks, welcome to one more edition of Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Willies, your host. Thank you so kindly for being a part of the show. We are going to have a great show for you today. You know, guys, I've been telling you about having a great guest on for the last few days. Well, we have no other today, the most important voice in progressive media right now today is with us. And who is that? Of course, you know him to be El Señor Thom Hartman from the Thom Hartmann Program. Thom Hartman, how are you doing today, my friend?
Good, only it's Tom.
Okay.
Don't pronounce the H.
Oh, okay, it's Tom. You know something? I've always been wondering that for some time. Every time I see the H, I do the H. But look, it is my pleasure, it is my honor to have you on the show today. How are you doing today?
Great. I really appreciate your having me on.
Well, absolutely.
Particularly to talk about this really important issue of guns.
Yes, I know, and it is important. And this is the book that Tom has. I gotta start getting rid of the H. The Hidden History of Guns. And I tell you why I love the book. I hadn't completed it, but after I realized I wasn't going to complete it, I started jumping around the book. This book is a full history, and what I like is how you've tied it not only into history, but to the sociology of the country. Why don't you tell us a little bit about why you wrote the book? First of all, tell us the name of the book again, where people can get it, and why you wrote the book.
Sure. The book is The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment. It should be available in any bookstore now. I think either today or tomorrow is the release date. It's available from online sources too. I wrote the book because we have a public health crisis, an emergency in the United States. And this has touched my life. My best friend through high school committed suicide with a gun. I have known people who have been injured by guns. I have used guns in the past. One of my three brothers is, has 4 or 5 guns, he and his wife, and owns a little gun range in his backyard. I mean, it's just, he lives out in the woods, and we go back to Michigan for Thanksgiving and Christmas, and my brother and I go out and competitively target shoot. So, guns have always, for me, just kind of been, I grew up in Michigan. Half my friends went deer hunting every winter. It's just, guns were never that controversial until my best friend committed suicide. And that got me thinking about it. And now we've reached the point, 2 years ago, there were 34,000 gun deaths in the United States. Last year, there were almost 40,000. The numbers are going up. And about half of them are suicides, by the way. And one of the things that Australia discovered when they aggressively started regulating guns in 1996 after the Port Arthur massacre was that not only did homicides go down, which they weren't certain was going to happen, accidental deaths in the home went down radically, which they knew was going to happen, but suicides dropped. And that drop in suicide has been sustained in the, almost 20 years, more than 20 years since they passed those laws. And the reason why is really simple. If you commit suicide or try to commit suicide by taking pills or slitting your wrists or something like that, you still have a few minutes to go, oh, damn, I shouldn't have done that.
Right.
I saw a guy interviewed last week, actually, on one of our local stations who had tried to commit suicide by jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge. And he was one of those few who actually survived. He smashed everything in his body below his pelvis. He can't walk anymore, but he survived. And the person interviewing him said, what was the first thought going through your mind after you jumped off the bridge? And he was like, oh, crap. Only it was a little more obscene than that. And thinking, I really shouldn't have done this. And most suicide attempts are not successful, but almost all suicide attempts with guns are successful. So we've got that. We've got, it's just it's there are layers of why to write this book. But I think that the simple math thing, Egberto, is that the more there's a linear relationship, a measurable relationship between the number of guns loose in a society and the number of deaths, suicides, homicides, and accidental deaths associated with guns. Period. The more guns, the more gun deaths. It's just that simple. And so I think it's really important that we start reconsidering our relationship with guns here in the United States.
Now, what I liked about the way you wrote the book is, as you know, a lot of people who are into guns, they're into guns as it's a religion. They're into guns as if it's something that is honorable. And I think you kind of took the myth off of the honor, this absolute honor of guns. So I think you started out by showing how guns in this country doesn't really have a good history. So why don't you kind of explain that with regards to not only racism, but regards to genocide and quite a bit others. I could have called your book a corollary to Zinn.
Yeah. And Howard Zinn was a brilliant historian. And, guns facilitated, and this is not original thinking on my part. Jared Diamond first pointed this out in Guns, Germs, and Steel, his New York Times bestseller back 15, 20 years ago.
Right.
Guns facilitated the largest genocide in the history of the world, the known history of the world. Somewhere between 50 and 1 million Native Americans were slaughtered on this continent. Not all with guns, many with disease. In fact, probably about half of them with disease. But guns made it possible. And those numbers are as high as they are, even though there were probably only 50 to 100 million Native Americans on the continent at the time the Europeans first arrived here. Those numbers are as high as they are because it was an ongoing genocide that lasted 400 to 500 years. And many would argue it's still ongoing, particularly when you look at the disappearances and rapes and murders of women on Native American communities. I think most people who've never been on a reservation don't know that if you're a white person, if you're a citizen or a black person or anybody, if you're not an Indian and you go onto the reservation and commit a crime, you go onto the reservation and rape somebody, which is the biggest crime that they have that falls into this category, and then leave the reservation, the reservation police can't come after you. And very often in the communities around the reservations, the local police will not cooperate with you. So, it's a real mess. So anyhow, guns facilitated that genocide. Guns facilitated slavery. You can't have slavery without a police state. And in order to have a police state, you have to have that superior weaponry, that superior technology. And so guns facilitated that police state of the institution of slavery, and I talk about that in the book at some length.
There's a part of the book that I found interesting because you said that the framers had an issue with how much power should we really give the population at large? Should we allow them to be armed? Will they come again? I mean, there was sort of a should they be armed or not armed sort of a thing that you talked about in the book. Why don't you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, it's more by way of puncturing that myth. The idea that we all need to have guns because someday the government may become oppressive and we're going to want to rise up and overthrow it. That idea was literally never discussed at the Constitutional Convention. It was never discussed in any of the writings of the founders that I've been able to find, outside of Jefferson saying sometimes the tree of liberty needs to be watered by the blood of patriots. And of course, he was referring to the French Revolution,
right?
A whole different thing. And it was never discussed in any of the ratifying conventions. In fact, up until the 1970s, Americans were never talking about it that way, outside of the Confederate South. And in the 1970s, there was an article written by a teenager in The Rifleman in the NRA magazine, stating specifically, as if it was factual, that the whole purpose behind the Second Amendment was so that we could protect ourselves from an out-of-control government.
Right.
Simply not the case. It's total BS.
I mean, think about it. What are they going to do against the F-16, right?
Right, or against a Black Hawk helicopter, or against
exactly.
a drone.
Exactly.
Or against the fact that the government has the ability to simply call up your utility and say, shut off their water, shut off their power. And how long are you going to stay in that house? I mean, it's like, come on, you really think you can take on a government even with an AR-15? No.
No, you can't actually do it. Now, you have a chapter there that you called, and based on what I write, I know you know that I kind of liked it, says neoliberalism drives inequality, inequality drives mass murder.
Yes.
Talk about that.
Well, this is, the big question is, why is it? I mean, starting in, I think it was 66 was when Whitman went up in the tower.
On the text, my alma mater. Yeah.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yes.
And and shot all those people up. That was our first real, at least well-known, well-publicized mass murder. And at that point in time, there was still a relatively strong middle class in America, and there was a broad sense in the United States among pretty much most people, all people, I would say largely, that if you really put yourself into it, you can be better off financially than your father was or your mother was, and that sense has vanished since Reaganism, since neoliberalism took over this country. Reagan was our first neoliberal president in the modern era, repeating what Harding, Coolidge, and Hoover did back in the 1920s with the Roaring Twenties, and this neoliberal experiment was continued under George Bush. It was continued and expanded under Bill Clinton. It was continued under George W. Bush, and it was continued under Barack Obama. We've not once had a president who's pushed back on it. The last president that we had who aggressively pushed back on neoliberalism was Lyndon Johnson. And if the Vietnam War hadn't so ruined his reputation, I think we would be thinking of him as one of our great presidents, because the Great Society was a significant expansion of the goals of the New Deal. So the more that we have income inequality, the more we're going to have violence. And in a country where anybody can grab a gun really quickly when they want to get violent, that's going to mean more gun deaths.
It's interesting because that is pretty much the article that I wrote for just yesterday, Sunday, for Daily Cuss, when I talked about it. People kind of interpreted it as I meant that I was talking about the Civil War as it was before. I was talking about a new kind of Civil War, and in fact caused by exactly what you had just explained there. I know we have about 12 minutes or so. So before we go, I want to do one thing. First of all, I think it is important for folks to get this book, The Hidden History of Guns. And one of the importance is the angle that Thom wrote it from. It's one that can change minds, Thom. I'm here in a very red area, and the way this was expressed, you took the glory. I mean, you didn't take. People will still want to have guns, as it's their right, but you took away the glory that some people, what should I say? The worshiping that folks have with guns.
Well, we
and
also
I think that's what's important.
Also punctured the myth of the cowboy and the gunslinger. The cowboys generally were not armed, and when they were, if they came into a town, they had to check their guns at the local sheriff's office. Gun control was normal in the 19th and early 20th century in the old Western towns, and most of the people who were the quote heroes of the Old West were actually Confederate soldiers who were criminals. They were war criminals, and they were expelled from their own states after the Confederate War. And so they went out west where they could start over again, and they started over again as criminals. Whether it's the James Gang or whatever. I mean, all these guys that have been glorified by the writers of the day in the late 19th century, virtually without exception, they were murderers, rapists, and thieves.
And it's great the way you brought up Daniel Boone and the history. How the myth, I should say, about all these guys and how the West was colonized, and that was
pure
excellent.
Mythology.
The mythology. But I want to pick your brain some, though, because on something. So, folks, before we're going to talk about the book again in the last couple of minutes or so, but please go ahead and get this book, because I tell you what, it's an easy read, it's a great read, and it's something you're going to really learn from. The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment by New York Times bestselling author Thom Hartman. Now, Thom, question: Medicare for all. I am very upset at the Democratic Party right now, and I many times when I write about it at Daily Kos, I get slaughtered. I want to get your opinion on this that I hope I know already, but I think that at this point in time, the biggest problem with Medicare for all isn't the Republicans, but it is the lack of support by establishment Democrats. Your thoughts?
I agree. No, I absolutely agree. The healthcare industry, healthcare as an industry category, basically encompasses about between one and two. No, it's probably in the neighborhood of $2 to $2.5 trillion a year of our economy. I mean, it's a major part of our economy. And any business that's spinning off or that's burning through $2 trillion a year can throw around millions or even hundreds of millions of dollars like chump change. And they are pouring that money down the throats of our politicians in Washington, D.C. And, so they own basically the entire Republican Party. The entire Republican Party's on the take. I mean, that's the only way that you get to have power.
Right.
But they also own about half the Democratic Party. And the battle that's going on inside our party right now, Berto, is the battle between the people who want to continue the gravy train, the corporate gravy train, and continue just, getting along by going along, versus the people who actually want to make this country work. And, Medicare for All is a really big part of making this country work, but it's going to take away hundreds of billions of dollars in profits from the pharmaceutical industry, from the health insurance industry, and from the hospitals. And they're all fighting it like crazy. So, that war, it just makes sense that war would spill over into the Democratic Party. That's where we need to be just, being citizen lobbyists with our own Democratic politicians.
Absolutely. There's this group called the Partnership for Healthcare Future or something like that. They have two tenets that they want to work on. The first one is that 180 million people are going to lose their private insurance, and likewise that taxes are going to go up, which both of those statements are true but misrepresented. And my question to you is, how do we tell the average American that private insurance that they're likely to quote unquote lose is not half as good as what we're proposing for Medicare for All, because of all the costs that would be removed from having to pay all these profits that are permeated throughout the system?
I think the way to do that is, once the Democratic Party is all singing from the same hymnal, which is going to depend to a certain extent, at least over the short term, over the next couple of years, on who they decide is going to be their presidential nominee. But if we could get the entire party behind Medicare for All, or some variation, some version of single-payer healthcare, then I think it's just a matter of talking about the details. Would you like to be able to go to the doctor's office and not have to pay a copay? Would you like to be able to pick up your drugs and not have to pay for them? Would you like to have your eyeglass, your eye work, your vision care paid for? Do you want to have your dental care paid for? I mean, these are the things that are right now on the table in the Medicare for All, and they're all things that are going to be negotiated one at a time. And as we go through those negotiations, because right now Medicare doesn't cover,
right.
teeth or vision. So as we go through those things step by step, that's going to be the educational process. But we're not going to have the debates on those things until the Democratic Party decides, hey, it's time to bring this kind of legislation to the floor and actually, have the debate in committee and open it up to the public.
Do you think we can have a change of heart of these establishment candidates, or are we going to just have to get rid of them and bring in the more progressive, try to run some more progressive candidates?
I think it's going to be both. You're seeing, I'm seeing, for example, like Tim Ryan and Beto O'Rourke were both DLC Democrats. I mean, they're both members of the New Democrat Coalition,
right.
which is or caucus rather, which is the reincarnation of the Democratic Leadership Council, Bill Clinton's old, corporate Democrat thing.
Right.
And both of them are starting to make noises like progressives now that they're running for president. They have figured out which way the wind blows. Years ago, a wise politician made the comment to me that the job of a politician isn't to lead the parade, it's to figure out where the parade is. That, a smart politician looks around and says, oh, there's a big parade, and I agree with it, so I'm going to jump in front of it and hold my flag up and say, this is my parade. And that's in fact what happens. I mean, Franklin Roosevelt didn't run on a platform of I'm going to do Social Security and unemployment insurance. He ran on a platform, frankly, of balancing our budget, which is crazy, right?
And look at what it turned out, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But he got into office and he saw where the parades were and he got in front of them. So you're going to have some politicians who figure that out and are able to disentangle themselves from all the corporate money they're getting. And then on the other hand, you've got other politicians, like we saw with AOC and what's his name, the guy that she replaced in New York State.
Yeah.
She replaced
I know who you mean, yeah.
Yeah,
I know
he was
exactly
like
who
number 5 in Democratic leadership.
Yes, he was supposed to be speaker.
Yeah, now we can't remember his name. I mean, that's That's how fast it changes, right? And so the one disheartening thing is the DCCC's thing that they will not pay for any consultants who work for candidates who are insurgents. I think that's just so wrong, and I think that Democrats need to just rain holy hell down on the DCCC for that. But beyond that, I'm quite optimistic.
Well, what I'm suggesting to folks, and I've written several blogs about this, is so the DCCC is telling these guys not to support these other people. Let's start talking about these small dollars again. The one great thing about, let's say, Ocasio-Cortez and Omar and Tlaib is that they are not dependent on the corporate dollar, and it's amazing the freedom that they have to speak when that is the case. They are so you can actually see the difference in their speech and those folks who have to cater their speech to those who are funding them. It's just amazing.
Yeah, it really and truly is, and it's very gratifying too. And I'm expecting that that's the face. I mean, you're looking at the future face of the Democratic Party when you look at those three women.
Absolutely. So, okay, Thom, one quick thing. I know you got to take off now. So, but one quick thing. Impeachment. Mm-hmm. I want the Democrats to start impeachment now so that we can get that out of the way. We know it's not going anywhere in the Senate. Let's get it out of the way so we can get back to the campaign. Your thoughts?
I think impeachment goes through there's three steps to the process before it finishes in the House. The first step is to hold hearings to determine if there's sufficient evidence to actually impeach somebody. The second step is, so you go through all the possibilities and you bring in witnesses about those. Then the second step is the deep dive. It's where you do the investigations and you find the actual evidence and you draw up articles of impeachment as a consequence of that. And by the way, those two steps, when they were done in the Nixon impeachment, took the better part of 6 or 8 weeks. I mean, it took a while, right? And then the third step, of course, is then you have the articles of impeachment drafted and submitted, and they have to work their way out of committee, and then they have to go to the floor, and then there's a debate on the floor of the House, and then the House votes on them. And what we learned from the Nixon impeachment is that when people follow along in the process of one branch of Congress doing the investigations, before the hearings started, the support for impeaching Nixon was like 17 or 19%. By the time they were done, 8 weeks later, it was up to, 66, 67%?
67%, yeah. Now, isn't it true that with the Mueller report gave them a running start based on how detailed it was, including the subheadings?
Well, sort of, except that Bill Barr threw a bolo out and wrapped it around the ankles of the Mueller report and brought it down. I mean, it's... we've got to undo the damage that Bill Barr did and then continued to do on TV this last Friday. Where he's going, oh, it's not a big deal and it's not a crime. And I mean, it's just, these are lies. These are just lies. And we need to be calm.
Tom, that's why you're out there, Tom. That is why you're out there. That's why you're out there, to make sure the folks find that out. And that's why we have to get more coverage. Folks, the name of the book is The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment, by this great guy out here, Thom Hartman, who writes, I am going to have to, I'm on my third book, and I just can't, I don't know how you do what you do. You are putting these books out with factual, great info like that. I'm going to have to figure out how you get to do it like that, my friend.
It's pretty straightforward. You write a couple hours every single day, and you produce a couple books a year.
Wow, that is great. But anyhow, Thom, some final words to our audience on your book and on anything in general.
The book offers some really great solutions to our gun crisis that are way short of outright bans or anything like that. I think that rational, logical approaches, regulating guns like cars, for example, very straightforward, simple stuff. And it would have a huge impact, and it doesn't violate Heller or any of the other Supreme Court decisions. It would have a huge impact on the number of people who are dying in our country every year as a result of all the guns sloshing around. So,
that's a great chapter. That chapter that you had, the correlation with cars, that was good. Thom Hartman, New York Times best-selling author and the host of the Thom Hartmann Program. Thank you very much for spending this time with us. We hit it exactly on the mark. You have a wonderful day, my friend.
Thanks, Umberto. And thanks so much for having me on your program. It's really a great program, and I'm so grateful to you to having me on. Thank you.
You have a wonderful day, Tom. And folks, that was Thom Hartman. And, I have to remember, it's not Thom, even though it has the H. He reminded me that the H is silent. But anyhow, folks, we're going to continue with the program. And what I want to do is I want to bring up exactly what we're talking about. We brought on Tom faster than I wanted to. I wanted to do a preamble before, but he had another commitment with XM radio and some other things. Again, the guy's in high demand, and he just got off his 3-hour show. So we were just lucky to have him with us. I want to talk about, if you notice from the blog post, I have 3 points that I said I wanted to talk about today. One was impeachment. One was Hickenlooper being booed and why he was booed. And we have to start, I think we have to start getting serious with these politicians and what they're doing to us. It is imperative that we start taking this seriously. Tom just mentioned about, oh yes, we have to be careful with the Democratic Party and what they stand for, and how are we going to really get Medicare for all and all these issues. We have to first make sure that we get that critical mass within the party proper, and that we don't have quite yet. Folks, the telephone number is 646-716-5812. Again, that number is 646-716-5812. Let me get to the Facebook page here to see if I have any questions that need to be answered before I move on. But I do want to tell you something, guys. I do want to tell you something. We are not going to get this change that we must have. We're not going to get this change that we need unless we do one thing. We have to take on the establishment. We have to do more than take on the establishment. I think you followed a lot of the writings that I've done about the left rail and the right rail. That is something that we are going to have to be cognizant of. Okay, let me get to some of the comments here real quick. Like, let's say Michael Rudnin. Impeachment is necessary as Trump is guilty of financial crimes, emoluments, bribery, aiding and abetting. What else? Oops, it just jumped. It just jumped on me. Okay, it just jumped on me. Bear with me. AG Bar is... Okay, I'll finish yours in a minute. This stuff just jumped on me. Let's see if I can get it all lined up here. Lined up. Let me get this lined up, my friends. Let me get this lined up, and then I'll be able to tell you what I'm trying to tell you. Okay, let's see. Okay, here we go. There we go. All right, now I have the messages in front of me. Okay, Senor Rudnin, is this going to be an interview with Thom Hartman? Yes, it is. Michael Rudnin says, daily mass shootings in America, yet our culture can't seem to cope with actual passing sensible gun control legislation, despite 90% of the people supporting such. There's a reason for that. The reason that in as much as most people want gun control, in as much as most people want background checks and all these other issues, the gun lobby has been very strong. But guess what, guys? The gun lobby is now in trouble. Let's remember that. The gun lobby is now in trouble. They have all kinds of financial issues that they're going to have to go through. So this is the time that we have to come at them and make sure that, you remember they used to have pretty much unlimited money to give to the politicians. That's not the case anymore. Okay, let's see. Mike Cisak complaining to Rudnin, that's odd. I've seen the opposite. Really? Have you seen any real gun control laws? I haven't, Mike. If you have, give me a call. Okay, Daniel Ledo. Hey, then the Egyptians have slaves? I have no idea they had guns as well. They had other equipment, but yes, they did have slaves. I don't understand what was the point of your argument or your statement, Senor Ledo. Maybe you'll explain it later on. And Ledo repeats as well, so it's impossible to actually fight against a tyrannical government, so we should be disarmed? No, that is not what we're saying. First of all, when you talk, when people talk about a tyrannical government, I wonder a whole lot, right? We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, we are the government. Let me tell you something, Ledo, because it seemed to have worked with a lot of conservatives. And I'm going to repeat this before I go on to the other questions because I think it's important. Let me tell you what things like the Powell Manifesto did, folks. The Powell Manifesto wanted to make you stupid. The Powell Manifesto wanted to make you brainless. The Powell Manifesto wanted to take your power away. And in taking your power away, in that manner, providing it, releasing your power to that good old thing called le plutocracy. And what do I mean by that, folks? It is simple. What they wanted you to do is believe that there was this entity. There is this entity out there, okay, that somehow is controlling everything, called the government. Government. It's a third party. It's something else. They are vested in you believing that fallacy. They are vested in believing that you are impotent. They are vested in you believing that you have no control over this thing that governs you. It's a fallacy. You have to take control. When you hear Daniel Ledo speak, or CSEC, or any one of your friends talk about government as a third entity, it is upon you to ask them, why is it, and I say this with respect, why is it that you are giving up your control? Why is it that you are giving up your power? Because government isn't those other people. Government is we, the people. And whenever you start thinking about government as somebody else, whenever you start thinking about government as some third entity, you have already lost. And no amount of guns is going to solve that problem. Owning guns and none of that's going to solve that problem, because what you've already turned yourself into is a slave of that thing you fear. I repeat, you've turned yourself into a slave of that which you fear. So let me dispel that from all those people who like to talk about the government, and you even have that kind of a way you say the government. You are the government, and if you're not the government, you better be the government, because that is how it's controlled, my friends. Daniel, Michael, stop fearing what these people are doing to you and engage them. Engage and be a part of it. That is how we do it. That is how we do it. Now, Mike Cisak comes out and he says, we don't want to mention that the people of Venezuela are regretting giving up their guns. Where did that fallacy come from? People in Venezuela didn't give up any guns. Latin America, we are just not in. I'm from Latin America, brothers and sisters. I'm from Panama. In fact, we're going to be having a Spanish version of Politics Done Right starting once a week pretty soon. An additional program. We're not going to lose any of our programs, but I'm doing one. Voy a hacer uno de estos programas en español. So we're going to be having one in Spanish, sort of tiered towards Latin America. I have a co-host from Panama that's going to be doing it remotely with me. But here's the deal. Here's the deal. Venezuela, the story that you're hearing here in Venezuela, it's not true. And I would hope that all of you who are tired of junk information, of fake news, would try to get information from people who know. Because what you're hearing isn't false. So like, oh, somehow that Maduro is corrupt, that is a definition of democratic socialism. That's a fallacy. There's a whole lot that has caused Venezuela to crater. A lot of we doing it, or the powers, not only America, but Europe and others, have the power to bring down countries because they're dependent on the financial system of the plutocracies of the world. If that is the case, if you don't play ball, we can destroy your economy like that. Ask Iran what's happening to them right now. All right, getting big money, corruption out of politics is the underlying problem. Oh, Rudnin, you're so right. Such undermines all the other issues we care about in favor of the plutocracy. If you're listening to the interview that I just did with Thom Hartman, you actually get that as well, right? Because what is occurring is the reason why the Democratic Party is not full-fledged into Medicare for all is because half of the Democratic Party is owned by the healthcare companies. half of them are owned by the healthcare companies. That is why Nancy Pelosi can't just come out and say Medicare for all. That is why Hickenlooper goes on stage in a place he knows are in complete support of Medicare for all and gets booed off the stage. Deservedly so. That is why Johnson gets booed off the stage. Deservedly so. Hi, Lee Grant. Welcome aboard, my brother. Okay, we also have Rudnan saying single payer would bring peace of mind, not having to worry about your insurance denying coverage or ripping you off with copays and deductibles. Yes, your taxes would go up a bit, but you'll pay less in the overall compared to that what you're paying now with private insurance while covering all of our citizens. You know, it's math. It is math. And you have to go through hoops, Mr. Rudnan. You get it. But those people who are against Medicare for all or a single payer system, they have to go through hoops. They don't understand something, right? A government-run system has to be so much more inefficient than a private system where its inefficiency is not only in profits and advertising and duplicative costs, it covers even fraud. So the corruption within the private healthcare system is much greater than any corruption that would have been inherent to a government-run system. In fact, most of the corruption that we find in government, think about this, I want you to listen to this clearly. Most of the corruption in government is private industry based, private sector based. In other words, you don't see governmental official taking your taxes and running away with it. What you find is private corporations overcharging for services, private corporation double charging services, private corporations telling the government you can't negotiate on prices. What is the biggest fraud in the drug industry right now? That there are certain parts of our industry that cannot negotiate prices of drugs. We're in a capitalist society where supply and demand reigns. But we're saying, government, you can't be a part of the system. You can't be one who's buying all these drugs and getting a break. You can't. Folks, it's a fraud. It's a fraud. And what the Powell Manifesto did to people like Mike Cisak and Daniel Ledo is they convinced them first that government was the enemy. They convinced them also that those of us who want progressive policies are somehow the enemy, even those progressive policies would be good for them. Better, it will make our progressive policies make it much better. I repeat, our progressive policies make it much, much better for people in general. And you know what it does? It helps with innovation. You can be more innovative because you no longer have to worry about, well, I can't do this job because I need health care. You have health care. So you can innovate now. You can move on. Mike Cisak says, Egberto, I'd like to know where in the U.S. Constitution does it authorize complete takeover of a single industry? I'd like to know where in the Constitution says you cannot. So therefore, we're squashed, brother. We can say the Constitution doesn't prevent the government from doing that, just like it doesn't tell the government it must do that. So what? Lee Grant, did you all see the man bun nut case storm the stage and move on? Big idea. Oh, yeah, I think you mean when they took the Kamala Harris mic away. Yeah, I don't know how he got across, but that was completely wrong for him to be able to get across that stage. Okay, let's see. Michael Rudnan, impeachment is necessary as Trump is guilty of financial crimes, emoluments, bribery, aiding and abetting, bank fraud, charity fraud, insurance fraud, money laundering, illegal campaign, donations, tax evasion, obstruction of justice. The list goes on and on and on and on. And you're right, you are right, you are right, you are right, Mr. Rudnan. The guy is a crook in chief, no doubt. The biggest problem we have is, you know, Charles Blow wrote an article last week where he said he really believes that, what's his name? Lindsey Graham, is probably being blackmailed by Donald Trump based on his 180 degrees on Donald Trump. And you know what? I'm starting to believe that it's not only Lindsey Graham that's being blackmailed. I think a lot of people are being blackmailed right now, and that is the saving grace for Donald Trump. I honestly, you cannot have somebody as evil, incompetent, and working to enrich himself just walk through like that and these other people not say something about it. I think a lot of these people are being blackmailed. I think the Russians has infiltrated the Republican Party and maybe some in the Democratic Party as well by going through all their works, and now Trump is holding the Trump card. I honestly believe that. How can somebody so incompetent remain in power? How can his party be so fearful of him? I think something is up, guys. Something is up. Rudnin, democratic socialism is extremely popular among Democrats. Yes, it is. So when Hickenlooper denounced socialism in San Francisco, of course he got booed. Absolutely so. This is bottom, please start from the top. I think I did start from the top. I went back and started from the top. Okay, Lee F. Grant. If we regulate guns like cars, can we expect 40,000 deaths per year like we get with cars? Lee Grant, I love the analogy, but you know what? A car, again, let's do the numbers. I love numbers, right? You don't have the gun in your hand several hours a day. You have the car that you're in on the streets several hours a day. So, you know, I mean, I think if you were to normalize it, if you normalize the 40,000 deaths based on the amount of cars and time in that time driving, I think we would be okay and you'll get a dramatic reduction. Diane Cantu Conklin, welcome aboard. Annette Forbes, welcome aboard. Elaine Kimsey, welcome aboard. Daniel Ledo, your buddy Tom said guns made slavery possible in America. This comment is true. This comment is true. It made slavery sustainable. It meant the people could run after the slaves. I mean, put it this way. If you had knives and picks and axes that these runners for slaves had, the slave would beat the crap out of them and they wouldn't be able to continue it. It's because one set had guns, buddy. It doesn't take rocket science to figure that one out. Tyler Francois, welcome aboard. I haven't heard from you in a long time, my friend. Remember those good old Occupy Kingwood days where we brought something to Kingwood had never seen before. Michael Rudden, because of suicides by gun, there's more deaths now from guns than cars. Regulations for cars include better safety seat belts, airbags, etc. You are absolutely right, Rudden. Won't read it all. Mike Cisak, under the direction of then President Hugo Chavez, the Venezuelan National Assembly in 2012 enacted the Control of Arms, Munition, and Disarmament Law with the explicit aim to disarm all citizens. You know what? If I were in a different country, I would support that as well. I haven't, by the way, I haven't reviewed what Mike Cisak just said. I'm just reading what he said. I don't know that that is a fact. That may have some sort of a right-wing spin, not necessarily from Mike, but from some of the places where Mike is getting his information from. Okay, Michael Rednan, Trump holds Republicans hostage by holding their voters. It's an interesting thought. I think it's deeper than that, though, Rednan. I honestly think it is deeper. I have a hunch there is some hanky-panky here going on. Welcome aboard, Lauren Wallace. Welcome aboard. Let's see, Daniel, he was booed for denouncing socialism, not democratic socialism. Look, you can call it whatever you want, Daniel. People use these terms interchangeably. I am now for not even using the term. I'm for now just telling people what we expect to do for them. We expect to give them Medicare for all. We expect to give them family leave. We expect to give them tuition, pay it forward tuition, college. We expect to give them loan forgiveness from the plutocrats who created a grand theft system of educating our kids. There was once a time in our society where the companies paid the appropriate taxes so that colleges would be affordable. They decided they did not want to pay taxes, even though the services that colleges and universities are training these people for is to serve the corporation. Why isn't the corporation paying its fair share of that bill? It simply is not fair. So, you know, let's look at things the way we need to look at it, as opposed to the way the Powell Manifesto has trained you to look at it. Okay, let me see if I've gone through all the comments. It looked like I've gone through most of the comments. Now it's time for me to do my quick plug here, folks. If you are just joining us, please remember this is a progressive show. I'd like to invite you to please subscribe to Politics Done Right, patreon.com/Politics Done Right. Please go to patreon.com/Politics Done Right. that is the name, that is a place that you can subscribe to this program. I can tell you that we work hard to bring this to you. We work hard to make sure that we keep you informed. We work hard to also engage politicians. We work hard to engage other activists. In fact, in a month, I'll be heading out to Philly for the Netroots Nation 2019, where I expect to interview quite a few activists, politicians, etc., and bring it right back to you. For those of you who are subscribers, I'll make sure to have some tidbits presented special for you. For those of you who subscribe, please do remember that you get access to all my books online, specifically As I See It, Class Warfare, The Only Resort to Right-Wing Doom is the first book that I wrote. The second book that I wrote is Lose Weight and Be Fit Now, Say No to Snake Oil Weight Loss. And why did I write that book? Having blood pressure that spiked to 240 over 140, being overweight, being overstressed. I learned that if I'm going to continue being an activist and doing what I'm doing, that it requires taking care of yourself as well. This is a very human book. It is something that says I am fallible. It is something that says I've made a whole lot of mistakes in trying to be healthy. I think I've finally cracked the nut, and that is the nut that I've cracked. I'm inviting you to get this as well. If you were a subscriber, you also have that online as well. Folks, do remember, all these books you can purchase at Amazon.com as well. You have the book Lose Weight and Be Fit Now, and of course, you have the book As I See It, Class Warfare, The Only Resort to Right-Wing Doom. I'm currently writing How to Make America Utopia, Take Away the Economy from Those Who Rigged It. And I learned something, I'm behind on this book, and I learned something from speaking to Thom today. He told me this once last year when we interviewed him at KPFT as well. And that is, Egberto, you just have to say you're going to put away 2 hours a day to write. I have to find those 2 hours, but I must find those 2 hours to write. It's just that there is so much. And unlike Thom has a big staff. I have a staff of 1. So until I have enough subscriptions where I can have I need a producer, and I need a producer a half-time producer that I can pay, but I need subscriptions to do that. So please go to patreon.com/politicsdoneright, patreon.com/politicsdoneright. One of the good things, folks, is because I'm a software developer, I had a software company, etc., I know how to do the software thing. So a lot of these things I can produce myself. All the videos I can crack, all the technology I put together here, if you take a look at all the mixers here and computers that are all hooked in together, I didn't have to hire anybody to do this or have anybody manage this. With the experience that I have, I was able to do that. But I do need some help with producing. So please give us please consider subscribing to patreon.com/politicsdoneright. That is patreon.com/politicsdoneright. I can guarantee you we are doing the work that needs to be done. Let me go ahead and get back to the screen to see if we have some new questions in. Let's see. Let's see what we've got here. If any more came in. Oh, yes, we have a few more. When in Philly, be sure to go to Pat Steak for cheesecakes. You know what? I think I saw that on the Food Channel, Les Grant. Are you out there in Philly? If you're out there in Philly, maybe I'll take you for a steak sandwich or something like that. Let's see. Rudnin says, need to step out early. Catch you tomorrow. Rudnin, I appreciate you being here all of the time. I consider you my my alter ego with all that information that you continuously put into the feed. I think it is every broadcaster hope to have supporters like you, Rudnin, who is active. Every subscriber love to have supporters like Ledoux and CSEC as well, because you know what keeps our conversation dynamic? What makes in fact, what gives us more to speak about is having these different voices out there. And as much as I disagree with my good friends CSEC and Ledoux, I think because they are representative of a sect in America, a part of America as well, it is important to have them. Let me get the caller on the line. Come on in. 573, come on in. You're hot.
Hey, it's Mike.
Mike, talk to me, my brother.
Well, I wanted to hit on something that you were talking about earlier.
Yes, sir.
And basically, it boils down to the difference between a democracy and a republic.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know that both of us could really agree that, protecting individual rights really is important.
Yes, sir.
If that's something we should really agree. Okay. In a democracy, as far as I understand it, whatever the majority votes for, that goes. Am I correct?
True democracy, yes.
Okay. Well, in a republic, it's the opposite. It's the individual rights are protected from the majority.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, from abuses.
Mm-hmm.
All right. That's why our government is set up that way, is to protect individual rights that are naturally, for us. It's not something that the government gives us.
Let me correct something that you're saying, though. Let me interrupt you for 1 second. I don't normally interrupt my guests,
Yeah.
but I want to do this because I think we don't have a lot of time, and I want to tell you this. A republic. Don't mix up a republic with what was done with the Bill of Rights. Okay, what you're saying is absolutely true. A democracy, a democracy can become tyrannical. You're correct. However, that was the reason that the framers, after a while, came up with the Bill of Rights. Because what we wanted to do is have inalienable rights. In other words, certain individual rights that the majority could not ever vote away. We cannot vote away your humanity. We cannot vote away your right to a gun. We cannot vote away your right to certain things. That is what it's all about. A lot of conservatives want to take it a step deeper. I think when it comes to state rights and all of that, for all practical purposes, they're wrong. Because in a society that, it made some sense back in the early days, but in my humble opinion, it makes no sense now in a country where mobility is so active. People are all over the place. They move from states don't mean much anymore. But go ahead, my friend. I just wanted to clarify that. Republic had to do with states having their own majorities and not population dependent. Democracy is population dependent.
Right.
The Bill of Rights went against that. Go ahead now, my friend.
Yeah. Now, if you do read through the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and all that kind of, there is a general theme that constantly goes over and over and over again, and it's the government cannot step over your rights.
True, and I agree with you though.
Over and over. Yeah. So now that is okay, and pretty much the 9th and 10th in there. It basically reserves everything else for the people, not for the government. Now, when you're pushing for a single payer, that is the people giving up their rights to those in government.
Let me
Okay,
stop
because
you and ask you a question because this is germane. This is germane. The question that I have for you then is, you could make the same argument for taxes that are used for war. True?
And that's true. Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, there is an explicit responsibility of the federal government to protect from all outside threats. Okay, that is actually written out as a responsibility.
And again, if you accept
that's why I was asking,
sir. If you accept that,
mm-hmm.
then you have to accept, in order to form a better, you have to be able to interpret the part of the Constitution that talks about the general welfare as well, and we will put single payer under the text
preamble
of under the general welfare as well. So I'm saying, these are all things of interpretation, and I don't even think you and I can talk about it, right? But I think we are way ahead of the founders. You see, people go back to the Constitution and say, what did the founders mean when they said this and that, right? I'll be frank with you, my brother. I really don't give a damn what the founders thought of, what they meant, or anything of that nature. I care about you. I care about what's necessary for you today.
Well, right. Yeah, here's the one problem I'm trying to point out,
mm-hmm.
okay? if you're wanting to have a more democracy style vote, majority vote, okay. My individual rights and needs are then trampled, okay, and there's nothing you can do to prevent that in a more direct vote democracy type.
Exactly.
And that's the problem, is that when you when you try and get to that point, like a single payer, basically what happens is you as an individual then vote to have that, and that's something I don't want.
And here's what
then
I'm
I'm
saying,
trampled on.
I get it. I honestly get it. Here's what I'm saying. I can say that the converse is true. That you are forcing me to pilfer my well-being to the private sector. In other words, I'm saying...
But no one...
Yeah, I'm saying that. What I'm saying
But
is...
no one else has a responsibility to pay for yours.
No. Actually, but that's not...
Everyone has an individual responsibility.
But here's the deal, CSAC. Here's the deal, and it's important that we understand this. We are living in a society. If I look at... You're a farmer. If I look at a lot of what we do, a lot of where my money goes, it is also to support you. And I have no control over that. But I accept that because we live in a society. Okay? And what I would like...
And that's... Right. So my last quick point, because we're running out of time here, but the problem is that a lot of times the politicians have to give and take.
Yes, we do.
Okay, as far as trying to come together and so on.
Yes.
So when the statement that you're making, we the people are the government, doesn't really happen. Okay. Right now, it's the bureaucratic state that is actually more powerful than your state representative, who is more powerful than the people who actually voted those people in.
And Mike,
okay?
I agree with you. Let me tell you what I'm trying to tell you, Mike.
And that's the problem.
Mike, here's what I'm trying to tell you, Mike. They want you and me to be fighting each other to keep that status quo. What I'm telling you is, if you and I joined together, and not only you and I, but all of us started to take the power back, we could. The problem is that they've infiltrated us with so much hate against each other that we can't work together. I could tell you how I could start that process in Texas right now. I got to first get people to like me. It's a shame that I say it that way. And when we get there, we can do it. What I try to do with Politics Done Right, my brother, and I'm serious about this, is to talk about empowering people. Look, you don't want single payer, I want single payer. Let's fight about it, but let's have an honest fight about it. We may break down somewhere like this. Mike. We may break down somewhere like this, and I'm going to go over 2 minutes to finish telling you this story. We could possibly...
I'll just... Yeah. I'm going to leave it there. What I'm going to do is, when I find some time, I'm going to write up some points and email it to you.
Excellent.
And give you some material for your shows and stuff. So
I would love
I'll leave
that,
it there,
Mike.
and I'll talk to you tomorrow.
That, but I want to finish the comment that I'm going to make. You have a wonderful day, my friend. Okay?
You too. Talk to you later.
Take care. All right. Here's what I wanted to tell Mike before I go. Mike doesn't want single payer. And he thinks that if we go ahead and get a single payer system, we're going to infringe on his right, because he wants the ability to have a private system, and he doesn't want to have to pay for somebody else's health care, is what he's saying. I'm saying I can't say I don't want to pay for that war in Iraq, but he supports the military all the way. I can say I don't want to spend money on foreign subsidies, but he won't. But I can't do that. Because we live in a society, I support all those things, right? I support what we're going to do as a collective. Now, when it comes to this issue about not having private insurance, for those people who have an attachment to private insurance, I think it's an attachment out of, I don't want to be rude, but it's out of naivete, thinking that somehow Your private insurance, who has to pay stockholders and all of that, can be better than a single payer system, even a single payer system with a bit of fraud in it. The fraud is not going to add up to the fraud of paying shareholders for doing nothing. The fraud is not going to add up to the fraud of having to have multiple databases, of having to have multiple computer systems, of having to have multiple duplicate of having many different insurance companies. We couldn't have enough fraud in a single payer system to cover the fraud that is the private sector healthcare system, who depends on anarchy, depends on entropy to be able to pilfer you. So what is the compromise that I'm talking about? I would be willing to compromise to say we have a basal system, not necessarily outlaw private insurance. We have a base system that says every single, because we consider healthcare a right, every single American, every single person living in America is entitled to this level of healthcare. These things that are going to keep you alive to some extent. Now, if you need brain surgery that has a 90% failure rate, it doesn't make any sense, right? But what we'll do, so we create a basal system, and then we say, but if you want anything better, if you want petals on your bed, if you want all these great things, then you can go ahead and buy your private insurance for that. Let's see which private insurance is going to want to sell that to you. But you can go buy it, whatever it costs, if that's what you want. But let's start getting a humane society. But what we have to do other than reframing the debate, is undoing what the Powell Manifesto has done into letting people believe that individualism is somehow humane or is somehow meritorious, is somehow good. It is not. It is not. Folks, one last push. Please go ahead and consider subscribing to Politics Done Right by going to patreon.com/Politics Done Right. That is patreon.com/Politics Done Right. I promise you, folks, this is very hard work for a very important cause, for a lot that we must do to move this country forward. Decided, nobody asked me to do it, but, decided that this is something that needed to be done, just like Thom Hartman decided it was something that needed to be done, and many others decided it was something to need to be done. And I ask you humbly for your support. We don't say you have to pay to see it. We're asking you to consider subscribing a few pennies so that we can continue doing this job. It's a lot of work. And when I tell you I put in 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, I'm not kidding. Every couple of months or so, I try to get away for 2 or 3 days. I have to take the wife somewhere every few months, or But again, this is hard work. 16-hour days. Patreon.com/Politics Done Right. This is important work. I love this work. When I tell you I love this work, I mean it, because you feel, you absolutely know it is something that has to get done. You absolutely know that it has meaning. Please support us at patreon.com/Politics Done Right. My name is Egberto Willies, and you know how I end this baby. I am what? Out!
Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is the progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. Remember, you can also send me a tweet to EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right.
1, 2, 3.